Looking for a cosmic adventure like no other? Zatswan, Multiversal Guardian is a high-stakes comic book journey through the multiverse with stunning art and an unforgettable hero. Get your copy today in ebook and paperback formats. Link in the description.
Hi everybody, this is Neil Allen, the comic creator behind the series Zatswan. You could pick up Multiversal Guardian, the graphic novel, 130-page graphic novel, in the link in the description on Amazon.com. You could get it in ebook format or paperback. So please check that out and leave reviews. And I am working on Zatswan. Last time I left off with you, I was working on getting in Alacazona's skin tone here with a 12 set of Derwent Coloursoft colored pencils. There's another Derwent line called the Derwent Pro Color. I do have Pro Colors too. I have more Pro Colors. I think the 24 set. Yeah, I have 24 Pro Colors and only 12 Coloursoft. I like both. I really do like these Coloursoft colored pencils. And so, my challenge last time I left off was getting a good light flesh tone out of just the 12 set of pencils. There is no dedicated flesh color. So I had to do a lot of mixing, and I'm going to stick with these Coloursoft pencils to get in Alika's blonde hair. So I'm keeping a very light touch here because her hair is really light, and I don't want a super saturated yellow. We're going to blend this out with a white as well, so the touch here is really light. So Alakazona here, we did talk about her some last video about how I was inspired by the Chrono Trigger character Shala when I made Alika. I think I was like doing a playthrough of Chrono Trigger, like when I was like building the foundation of Zatswan. And I was like, oh, that would be interesting. Like there were some, so it was like in my mind. And for those who don't know, Chrono Trigger is this very loved Japanese role-playing game that came out on the Super Nintendo. So we're continuing to work on her hair color here, bringing in some white to lighten things up. So yeah, as I was saying, Alika is the love interest of Zatswan. Speaking of love interest, I know I talk a lot about Green Lantern here and lately. I was reading some stuff from Hawkman fans online, and lately there's been discussion about Green Lantern, John Stewart, and Hawkgirl. There's been quite a bit, like in the DC comics as well as like the DC films. Like it's been a topic of discussion. And I was just thinking to myself how just that it's really interesting that what a lot of Jon Stewart's fans want to see is like the worst. I have a magnifying glass here, and I'm thinking about like getting some Windex and like cleaning it some, because there are some, I think I might do that just because it will improve. It's functional, but I could get it clear. I like it a little clear, so I might pause this video a bit and eventually go do that. But I was thinking, like, yeah, it's kind of interesting that the things that they want to see are like the worst things imaginable to some of these DC Comics readers. So we still have her ears here that I have to color, and I might do that. And we also have her hands that I did not color in yet, so I do still have some Alakazona skin tone to do, but I thought I just felt like going into the hair some. And the trick here is that we're going to use a light, very light touch of yellow. Now, if I was using other colored pencil sets I have other brands of colored pencils where I have like the full set, like all 150 colors or all 100 colors or however many these various lines offer, but I just want to use this 12 set of pro colors. So if I were to use like those other sets, I would have like a cream color and various colors that would go well for blonde hair, but I'm not going to use those, so I'm going to get that effect though with a very light pressure and then bring in white to blend out. But as I was talking about Green Lantern and Hawkgirl, yeah, I just think that's really interesting. I think what's interesting about this is that usually when an adaptation or something does stuff that hardcore fans do not like, oftentimes the adaptation doesn't go over well. I think the interesting situation with this Green Lantern situation, though, is the adaptation I think is more the adaptation is more popular than the source material. Like Green Lantern and John Stewart is more beloved and revered than. Wait a minute, what did I just say? I am focusing on like my artwork some here, so please bear with me if I said something pretty kooky. Green Lantern and Hawkgirl. In my mind, I think I said Green Lantern and John Stewart. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. We'll see what it is when I upload this video. But anyway, Green Lantern and Hawkgirl is more revered than Hawkgirl and Hawkman. And what do I think about that? I think that Hawkgirl has done very well for herself, actually, without being tied to Hawkman. And I do want to talk more about that. Okay, so what I was talking about was, honestly, at this point in time, my feeling is that Hawkgirl has largely supplanted Hawkman. So the interesting thing is, like, we've seen various not only in the comics, but also in cartoons, live action. Because here's a character that was supposed to be like a sidekick to Hawkman, but she, I think, has honestly, now I know that like some people won't see it this way, but I think that character has done better for herself apart from Hawkman. You know, she actually got to graduate into being her own hero. And I would say what really did that for her was the Justice League cartoon show. I think it's interesting that you have Hawkgirl in this new James Gunn DC universe, and nothing we're hearing at all about any Hawkman. I'm guessing he likely, I don't know, there's probably no immediate plans for him to appear in anything. So I think that at this juncture, it would not surprise me, actually. I assume that Hawkgirl is actually probably the more popular one. And, with Hawkman, she's just tied to him being subservient some kind of way. I think she has done better without him. And by Hawkgirl, I mean just Hawkgirl in general, the concept. I'm not talking about any particular incarnation of the character. So, I kind of think to act like... I do have where's my pencil sharpener? Where did you go? Here we go. There's another thing I want to talk about. I guess what I was going to say, to act like somehow, oh, these Hawks have to be together, and it's best for them to be together, and it's a disregard of, you know, the pairing and so on. Honestly, I think that Hawkgirl has done better apart from Hawkman than she has with them, and I'm going to take out... I recognize that I do have biases, like I am a big Green Lantern and Hawkgirl fan. I'm a fan of the pairing. But so I do recognize those biases, but what I'm looking at is that okay, this is a bright orange. We don't want orange. We're going to want a brown. So let's get this dark terracotta in Coloursoft line. So, okay, there's some stuff I could say about the art, but I'll continue on with my thoughts about these comic characters. Because, I mean, she gets to be her own character. She doesn't have to be, like, behind someone or latched to somebody. And that has ultimately been a good thing for her. So I think that... I mean, it might not necessarily be a great thing for Hawkman, because he's kind of, in many instances, getting supplanted by her. Like, it's interesting that there's a whole... Okay, so on the Justice League cartoon show, it wasn't Hawkman, it was Hawkgirl. In this new DC universe we're seeing with James Gunn, it's not Hawkman we're seeing, it's Hawkgirl. So, I mean, I think it's benefited Hawkgirl being apart from him, but I'm not going to act like everybody's always happy with everything. I don't think it's benefited Hawkman per se. And another thing I wanted to comment on. Let's bring in some cool colors. Like, where is my blue? Okay. Let's pull this down some. Another thing I wanted to comment on is that it's just because something... It is possible to do actually better than the original or the source material. There's nothing saying that, you know, it isn't. I understand that people like the source material with that particular relationship. And I guess there's this thinking that somehow that should take precedence, because it's just the way things are just supposed to be. And my thinking has always been like, well, like, what do people actually like? What do people want to see? You know, in general, not just, you know, you're doing it because it's supposed to be like that. What would people actually rather see? You know, and I think it's kind of... I've never understood that thinking, to try to withhold that from people. You know, withhold what they want to see. But when it comes to this John Stewart character, I'm seeing that there's like a lot of that's going on, and I'm not imagining that, or so what's going on with him, and this is the complaint that I've seen, is that he takes things from other characters. But here's the dilemma that those fans run into. okay, if he takes things from other characters, he like does them better, and he gets like more popular than them doing it. Like Hawkgirl and Green Lantern, too many people is better. Too many people, John Stewart is better at being Green Lantern than Hal Jordan, and the one they would rather see. Now, that's the dilemma that I'm seeing these fans are running into. Yes, the stuff does veer away from the source material, but people end up liking it better than the source material. And I think that's ultimately it's great, just because people are. I mentioned something in a previous video while I was inking some of Zatswan that I said, if you're not going to do something better than the thing you're being like, then there's no point in doing this. That's kind of, I hope that makes sense. I probably didn't articulate that thought the best. So let's add in, okay, we have a blue there and a yellow. We're going to want to add in a bit of a brown to get, here we go. Okay. But my thought was that, okay, you're making stuff that's actually better, and I know that better is subjective, and a lot of people, well, I won't say a lot of people, but there will be some people who do not think that's better. But the kicker for them is that there are a lot of people who think it is better. And they're just not dealing with it. Well, what I was kind of thinking is, I was thinking like, man, I wonder if I've ever been like this. I don't think so. I know it's kind of hard to judge ourselves, but to act like mega entitled and thinking that things have to, like, oh my god, like, I don't think I've ever gone on rants and let me see, like, kind of entitled rants about how I can't believe Hawkgirl's with Hawkman. She needs to be with John Stewart. Get her away from that mess. I don't think I've ever done that. Typically, the only time I've ever brought that up, that relationship, is because I've read comments from people with kind of viewpoints like that. The stuff that I don't like, I tend to just leave it alone. I don't act like, unless like kind of spurred on. I think, like, you'll probably see, like, what are you talking about, Neil? You said so much stuff about Hal Jordan and Hawkman and things like that. We're going to go way back into the history. I think the reason why I do something like that is because I know it's kind of like where you're going off, it sounds like a who shot first thing. Because that's what people would be saying. They would be saying all kinds of bad stuff about Jon Stewart, and it was like, like they would not like leave this character alone, and they still don't. Like, oh, he's boring, or he's the least interesting, and even when it's not about, like wanting Jon Stewart to be the main Green Lantern. I remember there were some discussions long ago where it's like people are like, where's Jon Stewart? How come he doesn't get any focus in any of this stuff? And you would get these other like fans trying to rationalize everything. Well, he's the least interesting. He's like the most boring. He doesn't work good if he's not in a team, and things like that. And of course, that was never true. I think that's the stuff that they would like to be true, but it never actually was. Um, but this makes me think of quite a few different things, actually, as I'm coloring in this Alakazona here. Blonde hair, you are going to see a lot of blues and greens and things if you look, so mixing these colors is giving us this complexity that I like. That's what I do love about mixing colors. You're getting all this complexity instead of just, laying in the colors that, when you have like a 150 set of colors, it's easy just to look up your cream colors for the blonde hair and just use those instead of actually, mixing to get all the colors you are trying to. When you have a smaller set, if you're good at mixing colors, then it kind of forces you to mix colors. And the upside of that is you get all this different complexity in here that you may not have gotten otherwise. So yeah, I remember when I first became a fan of Justice League and Jon Stewart, I would look up things online, naturally, as you do, and say, hey, I like this is really cool. And he was easily, far and away, the most controversial character on the show, not because of anything he did on the show, just because a lot of people didn't want him there. And they were very vocal about that. And the thing about me, I guess, is that if there's something I really don't like, I tend to leave it alone. I don't tend to act. Yeah, I tend to just leave it alone for the most part. For example, like, there were all these people complaining about something like I Am Not Starfire, this young adult comic. And I'm like, you can just not read it. Like, does it look like something that I would want to read? No. But, okay, so if it doesn't look like something I don't want to read, I just won't read that thing. You know what I mean? And I'm not thinking about it. Like, of course, a lot of these people make it their livings to, like, complain about stuff, so you can't really, like, they have their own self-interest going on there, so we could all just kind of boil it down to that, but it's not just the people making content like that, it's also the people watching it. It's like you guys are complaining about something that clearly doesn't look like it was ever meant for you, and you just simply do not have to read. You can just skip that and leave it for whoever may want to read it. I mean, that's what I do. I don't, like, kind of obsess about stuff that just doesn't look like I would like it. I do understand, if you like, if you're a fan of something and it's getting adapted, you want it to look like what you have expectations for that thing. That I do get, and you want it to, whatever you like, to be depicted well. But if I'm a little silent here. I guess I am working on my artwork, but I'm legit trying to think of examples where I did just go on a bunch of rants because something wasn't, some configuration isn't what I wanted it to be. I don't know. Like, nothing's necessarily coming to mind. Like, I just leave stuff alone, typically. I don't, I'm trying to be fair. That's why I'm trying to, like, think of, like, examples. I mean, I'm sure there are some somewhere. If I'm being just fair, I think that's just something people do. But I see a lot of that with Jon Stewart. Like, giving, like, for Jon Stewart fans to get what they would actually want many times, it just seems like to be the worst thing imaginable for some of these comic reading people. It goes against everything they like and everything they love. And I do think it's easy to think that, a favorite character of yours is, um, like, frequently under attack in particular. But I do think he actually does come under a lot of, he actually does. He has ever since I've known about him, ever since I looked him up, because of the Justice League cartoons. He's always come under a lot of fire. And I guess the thing that I'm thinking about to bring these thoughts, these, stray thoughts into some kind of cohesive point. What's really fascinating to me about this? Usually you would see a lot of stuff like that, and the character, if a character had this much backlash, people would they tend to just not like the character. I think why Jon Stewart might be the worst thing ever to some of these, like, comic book reading people, the thing that makes him actually really scary, he actually is popular, and you could argue more popular than the thing that they like. You know? He's not like, they might not be able to understand the appeal of him and the stuff he's involved in, like his relationship with Hawkgirl, but I've made videos talking about this before. They are actually the weird ones here. They've, like, been living in a bubble, it seems to me. I guess it's just like maybe some sort of something they've constructed to kind of cope with the situation, or stories they've told themselves that for what they would like to be true, where they live in this bubble, like, oh, nobody likes him and everybody hates him and nobody wants to see him, and his the Justice League cartoon's so old and nobody remembers it, and obviously none of this stuff is true. I think these days they would call that, I think the term they would use is cope. The problem that they're having is that he's actually more popular than the source material that they like, and that's a problem for them. And the thing, I guess my thinking is, like, again, it goes back to just what do people want to see. I don't, think that the source material, okay, if what he's doing is better than the source material and people want to see that, give them that. That's my thinking. Like, it's just as simple as that. Let's add some blue back here. So yeah, I got to thinking about this because I was just reading some stuff about Jon Stewart from Hawkman fans, and how they were kind of, dealing with these recent goings on with the character. Like, now that Green Lantern and Hawkgirl's being resurrected back into, the consciousness of people. Because people like the actress who plays Hawkgirl have talked about it. They're putting it in the comics. It'll be interesting to see how or if they continue with that in the comics. I assume they will. But the way the Green Lantern Corps comic is set up currently, it's like trying to follow all these different characters. And, like, the Jon Stewart focus has kind of been set on the back burner. So we'll just have to wait and see if they do more Green Lantern and Hawkgirl in the comics. I think so. And I guess what kind of got me thinking about this is, I was reading that stuff, but coincidentally, yeah, this is Alakazona, like, Zatswan's love interest. And as I was talking about before, like, if you're gonna do stuff, if you're going to do stuff that takes inspiration from other things, make sure that your thing is better. And as I do see a lot of, I do like Jon Stewart, the Green Lantern, and I do defend him, as you're seeing, against these, like, Well, I mean, I'm not going after the fans. I'm just kind of putting my view out there. That's what I'd say. I defend him by doing that, not necessarily by like um, confronting other people with their own views, but I just put my perspective out there. Uh, because when I was a little, well, I wasn't. Yeah, well, I mean, when I was like a kid, and I would, be in like some of these online, groups. This character is coming under so much attack. It's like, oh my god, I know I'm not the only one that likes this character, and I'm not. So that's one reason why I like put my perspective out there, because like comic book comic book fans like live in bubbles, oftentimes when it comes to these particular interests, at least, where they kind of get in echo chambers and they, associate with other people, like-minded people, and they kind of think that their perspective is the perspective. So I like to put out my perspective to kind of show others that no, there are actually people who like this, and there are a lot of them. I don't think I need to do that these days, because these people will basically speak up for themselves now. And I think that's shocking to some of these people who have constructed these, uh, glass houses of thinking, where it's like, oh, everybody hates John Stewart, and he's the least interesting one and the least popular Green Lantern. No, he is not. Are you kidding me? He never was, really. Especially not since Justice League cartoon is arguably the most popular one. Like that's a hard thing to like prove like definitively, but you can certainly make a strong case for it. Okay, we've been getting in her hair pretty good. Darn, I just knocked something over. It was like some pencils, but I don't think they spilled. I think I just knocked a tin over. Let me actually have a look at that. I'm going to pause the video, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to also clean my magnifying glass so that it's even clearer. Okay, I am back. So those were Derwent Inktense pencils that I hit, and they did not spill. The tin that I have them in got knocked over. So that's fortunate. And the magnifying glass is now cleaner and clear. Yep, I can see. Oh, yeah, it looks great. I can definitely tell the difference. And I haven't even blended any of this stuff out with odorless mineral spirits yet, so I should do that. What I was saying before I interrupted my own thought, which I know I do quite a bit, thank you for bearing with me. These are just kind of stream of consciousness videos in which a good deal of my brain power is being occupied by my artwork. Yeah, I do like John Stewart, and I do, put my perspective regarding the character out there often, I know. But at the same time, I do realize that there are like weaknesses with the character. I was like talking about Alakazona. So one of the problems with this character is that for various reasons, he's got all these fans coming at him. So if you're gonna be a fan of the character, of course you can be a fan of the character without like engaging with any of that. But you know how people are these days, with the internet and all that. Like sometimes you just want to get involved in fandom because you like the character. And while yes, you can do that without entertaining all these kind of controversial debates and things like that, and clashing with other fans, sometimes it's just kind of, I remember when I was younger, when I was like a kid, With Justice League, it would seem like it was like hard to avoid. It was like, just seems like maybe my memory is a little shaky on that, but I don't think it is entirely, at least. Um, it's like you're just trying to be a fan, and then you're always hearing about, oh, I hate him, he's boring with the ring, it should be Kyle, or why isn't it Hal Jordan? Why isn't it anybody else? Why is it this guy? And it's like, um, it just kind of makes you not want to deal with that. Which, like I said, of course you don't have to, but if you're just trying to go up into fan spaces and, express your fandom and enjoy your fandom, it's just kind of like, I don't know if discouraging is the... It doesn't discourage you from being a fan. I guess it just discourages you from being in places like that where a bunch of people are. You're clearly just not on the same page with them, I would say. So, yeah, I do like Jon Stewart, but I do see those as like issues with the character. And, so again, that's why I created something here like Zatswan. Not to replace per se, but it's like, okay, if I see there are problems here with this stuff, I will not have those problems. And in so doing, create something that, of course, is subjective, but at least in some ways better, because I saw the thing that came before and I saw it had serious issues, even though I like that thing. So here, let's actually listen to what some of those fans are saying, because we don't want to be so much in our own like echo chambers and in our own bubbles that we're like not aware of or deaf to or underestimating or not taking in enough consideration other perspectives. So let's listen to what they are saying. He's taking all this stuff from these other characters like Kyle Rayner or Hal Jordan or Hawkman. He's taking Hawkman's wife or girlfriend, or he's taking Hal Jordan's like spot on the Justice League. He's taking Hal Jordan's origin in that direct-to-video film. Okay. Here's what I will say to that. I see the point, but what he is doing to some people, I do understand this is subjective. What he is doing to some people is well, there are a lot of ways you can kind of approach that thought. But I will say what I was first going to say. He is doing those things to some people, and in many cases, actually better. Maybe not in all cases, but in many. If he wasn't, then, he just wouldn't be a threat to anybody. He just would have fizzled out, and you wouldn't be worrying about Jon Stewart, taking your character stuff. But yeah, he is a popular character, so he's doing something good. That maybe in some ways maybe he's doing things better than, at least to some people, than the character you love so much. Like I was saying at the outset, a lot of people prefer Green Lantern with Hawk, or Hawkgirl with Green Lantern versus a Hawkgirl with Hawkman. If that relationship was so incredible, like say Superman and Lois Lane, you're never going to see Jon Stewart with Lois Lane. I'll say that you never would. So that might tell you something there. I mean, I know that there are other points. I'm not saying that's the be-all, end-all argument to make in regards to that, but it is at least something to consider. Like if Hawkgirl and Hawkman was so great, owned by this big corporation that could have pushed them whenever because they're so great, but apparently chose not to, despite them being so great, would Jon Stewart have been able to waltz in there and have a more iconic and more recognized and more beloved relationship with Hawkgirl than Hawkman? Would that have even been possible if Hawkgirl and Hawkman were so great? I don't know. If Hal Jordan was so great, if he was just so vital and so incredible, would Jon Stewart wouldn't even be a quote unquote threat to these characters. Um, Characters like Clark Kent are so great that nobody's going to tolerate, Superman, at least for long. That's not Clark Kent. I don't think they would. Unless it was some kind of weird alternate universe thing. And Clark Kent is still around and able to be and present in some capacity. Like there's no way DC Comics is going to leave a Clark Kent dead for 10 years. He was dead for what, like 3 months? But they do that to a Hal Jordan. So, but the interesting thing about me is, like, I guess that's the difference that I'm seeing. Like, I think I see Jon Stewart fans like this in general. That entitlement isn't there as much. Not as much. I know various fans can be kind of, extreme in ways, but like I never like position Jon Stewart as so great, or he deserves this and he deserves that, and and he's clearly the most popular, and come up with all these justifications for whatever. I don't see that as much. But I do, another argument you can make against that is that these like stories are ever evolving. They change, and so they don't always have to be the exact same thing all the time, over and over and over again. So like a Hawk Girl doing something different is it's just part of the story evolving. You know what I mean? That's another thing that like if everything was completely static all the time, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to read these comic books, is because they're static all the time. They're the same thing over and over and over again. And that's just not exciting. Like, it's hard to have stakes when everything's just going to be the same status quo over and over and over again. Or everything's going to get put back to, the status quo. Like manga, for example, doesn't operate that way. There are real stakes. Status quos can for real change and not get put back. And that's one of the hooks of the stuff that, like, these other comics don't do nearly as well. And you could argue one of the reasons why these comics aren't doing nearly as well. But that said, I will take into consideration, like, I do take into consideration those concerns. The stealing from these characters and stuff. Okay. So I look at that and I'm like, all right, well, acknowledged. So it's like, okay, well, what can we do better? And one of the things with Zatswan, I think, that I've taken great care to do, of course, is build stuff specifically centered around him, centered around Zatswan, meant for Zatswan to tell his story, and that doesn't involve these other characters or elements from these other characters' story. So, that is a fair criticism, it is a fair criticism about Jon Stewart, but I don't think that it's not the there are counters to that criticism, but the criticism itself, okay, I see where you're coming from. The character needs more stuff of his own. Yeah, I think so too, honestly. So so I can't do that for him, nor would I if I could, because those ideas can go to my own thing, which is what they're doing here. So it's like, oh, okay, I see where this character is having some problems. I will address that with my own. And as I was saying, that's how we get advancement. By noting other problems and other things, and then applying solutions in our own thing. So as I was saying, Alakazona obviously is Zatswan's love interest, not taken from anybody else, was built and made to be Zatswan's love interest, though she is a character with agency in her own right, and an important character, the female lead. We're getting in her hair here, and she has a very elaborate hairstyle, as you were seeing. I do really love, I'm looking at it through the phone, I do really love how it's coming out, though. These Derwent Coloursoft pencils are really good. I like them a lot, actually. We're getting a lot of complexity in here with these browns and greens and blues. Like some of the yellow and the blue have blended to make these cooler greens and these browns in here, which you would see in blonde hair if you look. So we've gotten a good skin tone in and a good blonde hair with just this 12 set of pencils. I do have a lot of colored pencils in general, but not a lot of Coloursoft. And I guess I don't buy a lot of Coloursoft. Well, for one thing is because they're not horribly cheap. They are a, artist grade pencil, and artist grade pencils do cost money. And ultimately, while they would be fun, a big Coloursoft collection would be fun to have and nice to have. I find I don't necessarily even need one because I can blend the colors. So the blendability with these pencils is so good. I can just blend the color that I would need. So we're getting in Alacazona's blonde hair. It has been said by people that she looks like she is from Sweden, which I can see where they're coming from with that. I think she can pass, yeah. I don't know Sweden, but interestingly, I do know Denmark. I had a girlfriend from Denmark, actually. So I guess it's like, yeah, it's what they say. I guess people write what they know. And so here's Alakazona. Is there any connection? I don't know. Actually, I've never actually contemplated that too much. Denmark, yes, it's a windy place with a bunch of islands around everywhere. Windy and wet, and can be cold. Windy, wet, and can be cold sometimes, of course. And there is something very fascinating about those Europeans, I can tell you. And if you don't know this, it might blow your mind. So it turns out that, interestingly enough, they do not believe in window screens. I have actually a kind of funny story about that I can go on as I'm getting in these curls on Alex's hair. I think I will tell you. So anyway, the girlfriend, I guess I could just say her name. Her name is Sanny. She had a cat named Augustus. And Sandy lived in the second floor of an apartment building. And I could not believe this actually. It was surreal stuff. So anyway, she lived in the second floor of an apartment building and had Augustus, the cat, the kitty cat. And Augustus like saw a bird or something, and the window was open, and Augustus, you could probably see where this story is going. Augustus straight up jumped out that window of the second floor apartment building, and it was anyway. And I'm thinking the whole time, and I was saying a lot of this too, like, if you had a window screen up, that wouldn't have happened. Like, why don't you have window screens up around here? And like, these are some interesting folk. And you know, she's like saying stuff like, well, you might be wondering about Augustus. He was okay in the long run. He ended up like fracturing his jaw, but he was okay. Sandy put medicine in his kitty food, so there were like painkillers and stuff in there, and he was all right, which is good. But Sandy was like in a fret. She's like, I have to move. I can't have like Augustus jumping out the window like this. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I mean, to me, like, moving isn't, I guess people might feel differently about this, but moving isn't, like, necessarily the smallest thing in the world. It's kind of a thing to me, you know? But she's just like, my cat's jumping out. I can't live on this. I gotta live on the first floor or in a one-story place or something. I can't, do this. And I was thinking, like, this is, there's an easy solution to this problem, Sandy. Window screens. If there was a screen on the window, the cat wouldn't have jumped out the window. Likely I've never seen that. Have I seen that actually? I'm kind of thinking, have I actually? No, I don't know. I don't think I have. I have a sister who, I'm thinking, was that a cat? And I'm like, no, that was my sister. She like, it was dark or something, and it was like a screen door, that leads to the patio. She just, I guess, didn't see it was closed and walked right through it and like tore down the whole thing. It was funny. It was like dark, and I guess she thought the door was open and didn't see the screen. So I was like thinking, oh, I have seen something like that, but I'm like, no, that was my sister. That wasn't, a cat. No, I've never seen a cat just jump through a window screen like that. But she had this window. It was just open. These people just have windows that are just open, and I'm like, that was kind of a different concept to me, plain as it sounds. And yeah, that's the way they roll over there, and that's what they're doing in Denmark and Sweden. I imagine it's the same thing. They're not. They're a little different, but the Danish and the Swedish aren't that different. They can talk to each other in their own native tongues. And yeah, I think, well, the dialect is a little different, and the accents like are different, but they can talk to each other, and they can definitely like write to each other. Anyway, that was a long anecdote, but I don't even know, how did I get on that? I think Alakazona looking like a Swede, something. I don't remember, but that was a pretty long anecdote. Yeah, Augustus in the end was okay. But anyway, we're continuing to get this. He was a good cat. He would, she would be sleeping in a lot, and he would just wake her up all the time by ramming his head into her. It was a funny thing to see. Like, 'cause he wanted to eat. You know, so he would just pop up like, boom! He would like ram into her with his head. And then she would finally get up. But I like Augustus. But anyway, let's talk about what we're doing here. This is a very elaborate hairstyle. You're seeing, like, I gotta do all these ringlets here. You're actually watching me do it. I appreciate having you along with me. It makes the rambling, makes the process just kind of go by. I haven't blended out with mineral spirits in a while, have I? Let me see. Let's do a little bit of that, actually. Let's get a touch of odorless mineral spirits. It's interesting. Maybe I should explain how these. It's like I keep a little bit in here. I have a bigger bottle of them. Gamsol odorless mineral spirits I take. Here's the big bottle. I don't like dipping my brush into the bottle because you can get pigment from the pencils on it and contaminate sort of your spirits in here. Not that it would be horrible, like it wouldn't like turn the whole thing blue or something, but you still don't want to do that. So anyway, this kind of breaks down what's called binder in the pencil, and it kind of just smooths everything and blends everything out. So a lot of colored pencil artists use odorless mineral spirits, especially like professional ones. They are really good. Gamsol's really good. Take a little care with it though. Like, it's best to use it in a well ventilated, like have a window open and maybe a fan going, and to keep the top on tightly because this stuff can be toxic. I don't like to scare people away from art supplies. They're okay, just don't drink it. And Gamsol's not that bad. There are other things that are much worse. Like, interestingly, I do a lot of art mediums, if you couldn't tell. I like watercolor and colored pencil, and I like acrylic paint and pastel, and basically I like pen and ink. I like a lot of stuff. But interestingly, one thing I do not do is oil painting. And the reason, there are a couple reasons why I don't oil paint. One is that the thinners for oil paint can be and often are very, very toxic. And you don't tend to want to be doing that stuff in an area where you would sleep or eat, because you're using stuff like turpentine. If you don't know, the way it works is like when you get a tube, imagine this is a tube. You squeeze the paint out and boom, it comes out onto the palette or somewhere. That paint is going to be very, very hard. And even if you stick a brush on it, you're not going to be able to move it. And to get that paint to flow, you need to use thinners. And which in painting we would call it medium. And it's not necessarily the paint that's really toxic. That's not what you have to worry about. It's the medium that you need to get to move the paint, to make it malleable. That's the toxic stuff. And it's like stuff like turpentine and and I don't want to, like, Gamsol odorless mineral spirits is not like something you really need to worry about. And when you're using colored pencil, you're using so little of it, you don't have to worry about it too much. But just don't drink it, like, then it will be a problem for you. It's poison, essentially. But with oil painting, you gotta use like a lot more of that stuff. When you see Bob Ross like dip his like paint brush in the thing, that's not water, that's that stuff. When you like beat the devil out of it, like he's dipping his brush into like medium to get the paint off. Oil and water will just bounce off of. See, the medium for watercolor is water. That is not toxic. But obviously, as you probably know, oil and water don't mix. Water's just going to bounce off that oil, and it won't move. So you got to use like those chemicals to get the oil to move, and those things are toxic. And there's a story of a guy. He was like worked for the company, the video game company Konami, and he was doing a lot of that box art in the Nintendo Entertainment System era days. Like, I don't think he's not the one who did Metal Gear, and he's not the one who did Castlevania, but he did a bunch of other stuff. Which Metal Gear and Castlevania are awesome box arts. But back then, you had a lot of oil paintings and airbrush for like the art for those games in like say the late 80s and early 90s. And he was the guy who was actually, did he do Metal Gear? I don't remember. I'd have to look it up, but he was the guy who was like doing paintings like for that, and he would get like, I think he said something $10,000 a gig, and oftentimes, and that was like, or for some gigs, and that was back in the 80s, just to do a painting. Bayou Billy, he did Bayou Billy, which is this really difficult Nintendo Entertainment System game, and he actually used his face as the reference for Bayou Billy. So sadly, this guy was doing oil painting. He was doing oil painting in his garage, and it could get cold out there. So it's probably fine if you have the door open. If you have the door open and a fan blowing that stuff out, but it could get cold in the winter, and you close the door, and he's just in this enclosed environment with all this chemicals and stuff, and ultimately what that stuff is cancerous. Like if you expose yourself to that stuff too much and you're breathing it in, and you're just sitting in an environment with it for hours and hours, regularly, there are adverse effects. So sadly he got cancer. He survived, but I think it definitely took its toll on him, and so I never forgot that story of that, because I actually like retro video games are a big passion of mine. And I have talked somewhat on the channel about how retro video game artwork has been a big inspiration for my own artwork. And, I'm a big fan of those old Konami games, Contra, Super C, Castlevania, the Castlevania series in general. Castlevania is like one of my favorite game series. Metal Gear, Turtles games, Ninja Turtles. And yeah, so the guy who did a lot of the box art that I love for those games ended up getting sick doing the box art. So, and he was an oil painter and just wasn't taking, proper precautions with that stuff, and he got ill. So oil painting, it's just like too high maintenance. You need, like, for me, I would need more of a studio designed specifically for that, and that's just a whole thing. Now there are like I'm just doing this at my desk here. There are non-toxic oil paints, and there are ways to paint with oils without using those mediums. There is like oil paint that is like you can use water as the medium. Honestly, I haven't explored that stuff. I don't think it's not quite the same. Like people say it's not bad, but it's not quite the same, but might be worth looking into. But yeah, oil, that is probably the main reason I've stayed away from oil. It's the medium is just to move the paint thinner essentially is just very toxic. Bob Ross ended up getting sick, but I think people say that he didn't die from, exposure to paint medium too much, but some artists sadly have, oil painters. You just have to take, I'm not saying it's if you oil paint it's going to kill you, but what I will say is that you need to take proper precautions doing it. You need to paint in an essentially well ventilated room with a lot of air current. So you don't want to, that's the thing to do. So have window open and have a good fan, probably not just probably good to have a ceiling fan, but also like a floor fan or something that's pretty powerful, that can just like blow the stuff away. You know what I actually have here? I have it right here. So I do have like xylene based markers, like I was using them in that video I made where I was doing the cover. Chart Pack AD markers. Those are a xylene formula, like the famous marker you may have heard of, Copic markers. Those are alcohol. The xylene formula, you don't want to breathe in the fumes of that. I don't think they're toxic, but you still don't want to breathe too much of that in. So what I do is I actually have one of these hand fans here, and when I'm doing like marker work like that, I'll like set the fan. The air will blow it away from you, so the fumes aren't rising up towards my face. Before they get there, the air blows it away and out the window. So when you're working with like stuff like that, ventilation is your friend. So you can do your work, but you want to take proper precautions while you're doing it. There are a couple little dangers to art. Just you want to do it safely. Like sadly, that guy, Konami Man. I actually think Konami Man is a character, isn't he? Or am I just thinking like Mr. Game and Watch? I think Konami Man is actually a character. But the guy who was doing like the paintings, yeah, just doing it doing oil paintings in a garage with the door down and no fan in there, and that's your job, so you're probably doing it for hours and hours at a time. Yeah, that's not good. Should have known better. Should have known better. Turpentine's like some. Then again, he was doing his stuff back in the 80s. Still should, like, I say that. I guess you can't see what I'm doing. I say that because obviously we don't have, or they didn't have the internet back then. But still, you should know that, like this stuff is not good for you to be breathing in too much of, So maybe I'll try like the safer versions of oil paint sometime. These like corkscrew curls really get me, like they are very time consuming to do, but I gave her this hairstyle. I don't want to keep you here forever, so I'm thinking maybe this would be a good spot to leave off. We've done quite a bit of work on Alakazona here, the female lead in Zatswan. I'm obviously going to do more stuff off camera, but I think this made for a pretty interesting ramble, and we went kind of all over the place talking about Hawkgirl and Green Lantern and, fandoms who hate those things, hate Hawkgirl and Green Lantern together. Talked about Denmark and Danish girls and Danish cats flying in the air, and the guy working for Konami. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, so this was quite a ramble, but it was fun. I hope you got something out of it. And be sure to like and subscribe, and I will talk to all of you again very, very soon. There's a lot more content on the way. See you then.